Hi, my name is Alexis Cohen, and I'm the host of Art Medicine Masterclass. Discover how to overcome fear, trust your intuition, and stand in your creative power. In this series, over 20 artists, healers, activists, and teachers share the wisdom of their experience to help us align with our creative purpose and vision. And today, we are here with Elena Tonetti-Vladimirova. She is the founder and director of the international organization Birth into Being, which is dedicated to conscious evolution. She's also a speaker, filmmaker, and author. Her book, Birth as We Know It, was a life changer for me. When I saw her movie, it was a big yes. It was a remembering that birth could really be joyful, pleasurable, powerful. And since watching this movie many, many years ago, birth has been one of the biggest teachers of creative power in my life. So we are here with Elena. Hello.
Hello, it's a pleasure to be here.
Oh, wonderful. So let's just jump right in. And can you just tell us a little bit more about your work and what led you to it?
Well, what led me to it, I'm doing this for 35 years, so there was a lot of different leads and different modifications and adjustments, and I am kind of crafting my way through. What I'm doing now is not what I did 15 years ago or 30 years ago. I started in 1982 when I stumbled into very visceral, raw realization that I'm working way too hard to achieve too little. I was always committed to finding a way of improving life around me. It's a commitment I remember as long as I remember myself. I very acutely remember that I had this burning desire to make life different. Where I come from in Siberia, I was born in the 50s in the place that is not very livable, really, for humans. And life was tough just as it is, nature-wise, but given the oppressive regime, and about Siberia, that's where they send people to kind of be punished. And I had this permanent drive to do something about it and change the way things are. And I was involved in many different youth organizations, and then finding my way. And at some point when I stumbled into real roadblocks, my digging brought me to the birth field. I realized that, well, with the help of other people, that whatever it is I want to do cannot be accomplished with the same mindset. Einstein said it. We were still in the same mentality that was creating that much of a mess. Mm-hmm. So when you look at the moment, the turning point, when do we stop creating that much mess as people? It comes back to the way we are making ourselves, the way we're making the next generation. And that brought me in my attention into the birthing field. And when I saw the way we were born, it was pretty horrifying. I was in my late 20s, quite determined not to have any children, because I was, willing to invest my energy, my creativity into other things. And I view motherhood as an obstacle and kind of not something I wanted to do. But then when I was looking more closely at it, I realized that that decision was driven by my terror of birth, that I was simply terrified of this notion of having a child, that all my decisions were not really conscious decisions as I perceived them. They were just driven by not knowing anything about how to make people. And when you look at making people as the turning point that can change the quality of our life, then all of a sudden it got my curiosity. I wanted to know more about it. And how do I, from not wanting, bring myself to start wanting to want that, to experience that, and to overcome my fear of birth and unleash something in me that I felt that was really holding me back in life in general, not only from giving birth, but the more I looked at it, I was realizing that creating is the same energy, whether you're creating a baby or creating a project or creating new relationships or creating the next upgraded version of yourself. That process of creativity is basically, it's either flowing or it doesn't flow. And when you start looking at what is holding it back from flowing, it comes back to the same thing. The life force not engaging for some reason, not willing to explore itself. And the reasons for that, in my case, was my own birth trauma, which was pretty severe. From everything I know about birth now, I got it pretty rough. So what I was noticing is that my intentions were just miscarried. You know, whatever I wanted to do, I would kind of get engaged into this addictive self-sabotage. And as I was exploring my ways of where do I give my power away, I had to look at so many different situations in my life, and every time I had to look further and further and further until I realized, my goodness, my birth was not even the beginning of it. You know, I was dealing with my mother's anxieties and fears and conditioning, and then it turns out that she was actually a pure reflection of her mother's basic settings, who was in turn a reflection of her mother's. And, you know, when you look at the process of people making, you cannot help but notice that the egg that became me was inside my mother's belly when she was still inside her mother's belly. You know, it forms about halfway through pregnancy in girls. So I realized the scope of the issue. Like, what's holding me back is really the basic setting on suffering that is in my family lineage. And then when you look at the bigger picture, it's not even in just my family lineage, but it's in the family lineage of basically everybody. Because look at the history of women. Women were, you know, not very respected by traditional religions, social, economical structures of our societies for thousands of years. So we were really kind of a commodity. Women were sold into marriages. Women were forced into, you know, having babies from men they didn't like or didn't know, and raped through the history of wars, and domestic violence was even completely legal until very recently, and is still legal in most of the countries around the world. So women do not have a history of healthy creativity and healthy sexuality and healthy life force surging through them. And it's in my blood, it's in your blood, it's in our bones. So when you look at this history of uncried tears and ocean of rage and anger and sadness and unspeakable injustice that was committed against women throughout thousands of years of human history, then it's really easy to understand why we now don't really know how to flow effortlessly, why we are so contracted and clumsy in a way we try to express ourselves. Of course, every rule has exceptions, and there are sisters out there that are going for it. But who knows what their story is and what kind of challenges. We don't know. Every rule has exceptions. I'm talking about the general temperature of mass consciousness on this planet right now, that we have to deal with a lot of luggage, from generations past and from our own history. What brought me here right now, I just speak to you, not knowing what's gonna come out of my mouth at the next moment. I am in this creative flow right now as I reflect on that creative flow, and as I know that everything that I say right now is a sum total of everything I ever learned and done, and my mother ever learned and done, and everything we did not do, and everything we didn't get to learn. So everything that I create is coming from my desire to learn myself. The film dimension, Birth as We Know It, it was making me as I was making it. And basically, at some point, I have this idea to create the film about making this film, because it was the actual process that I was just recording my journey of making this film. I was recording it and then inserting my insights, finding a place in the film and inserting it. So I made the visual first, and then I kind of was making up the text as I went, because I was going through this giving birth to that baby, as I was reflecting and noticing what I'm going through. And it wasn't going easily. I actually gave up on it 6 times because I thought it cannot be done. I ran into every obstacle that there is out there, and finally thought that, I can't really do this. It's too big. I felt like I was giving birth to myself, like I was anchoring this new birthing paradigm through my body, through the work that was coming through me. And I was just, committed to stay open and available. And every time I give up, a few months goes by and I pick up the pieces, and it's like, no, I have to finish this. And I would do the next piece until I run into the next wall. And then later I found out that story of making the film was directly replicating the story of my birth. Mm-hmm. And this is it. This is the bottom line, that when we try to embark on something new, we activate our birth trauma. Mm-hmm. And that's about getting pregnant. Pregnancy activates our birth trauma. It's about getting married. Wedding activates our birth trauma. Getting a new job, starting a big project. Whenever we start something new, it brings up everything that was not resolved in our subconscious, in our psyche. And needless to say that by the time I was making my movie, it was 2005. So I had many years of kind of self-exploratory work that I was already teaching workshops. I already had under my belt quite a number of discoveries and accomplished pieces that I felt like, okay, I did that. I dealt with that. That covered, check. I was going through a lot of stuff that I thought was completed. But then what was coming up was the next layer, the deeper layer of my feminine lineage, I would say, some basic settings in my psyche that was beyond my awareness. And you don't know what you don't know, right? Mm-hmm. So you deal with what you already kind of could articulate, verbalize, reflect upon, and when you name it, you start doing something about it. But unless it's under the radar and you don't really know what's going on, then how do you work with it, right? So every next thing that comes up and reflects to us the obstacles and those roadblocks, just be grateful for them, because they're helping you understand what your next step is. And this is true in birth, and this is true in anything you want. You want to create a poem or a painting, you can start, but then, what's known as writer's block. It just comes up and you don't remember what you wanted to do or wanted to say, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Wow. Yes. So there's a few different things that, I think this is such an important topic, especially around, we're talking about creativity and these places where we get hung up. And, you're speaking to, like, oftentimes what comes up is this, these traumas that we don't know about when we're approaching these rites of passage, like birth, weddings, that it's very common for these subconscious things to surface. And that, sometimes we don't even know that they're there, and we can really be grateful for, actually being brave that we're willing to move through this rite of passage, because it's not only the unknown of the next phase, but sometimes it's very unknown what's going to surface for you as well. And so it would be really wonderful just to hear, like, when you were talking about making the movie, and when you were seeing these patterns surface for you while you were making the movie, how did you deal with it? How did you move through these, whether they're memories or blocks or, visceral feelings? How did you get to the other side?
There is no one size fits all. There is different things that helped me through that. First of all, my commitment to, like, my general commitment in life to service and to myself, to complete something that I started. It's my very important rule in life that I finish what I start. And this is kind of the general demeanor. I don't really quit. I can quit knowing that that's not permanent, unless it's something not worth doing. And this is basically the pivotal point. It's one thing to be able to speak English. Another thing is having something to say. Mm-hmm. That's big. So when you have something to say, you're under an oath to the source of all life, to your own spirit, to actually say it. And that is the truth with capital T, that is demanding to be expressed and spoken and articulated, and just, it's unstoppable. And it's just allowing myself to be a humble vehicle, to be kind of the lips that pronounce the words. So that's one aspect. Another aspect that, there is, the body has a lot more limitations than the spirit, which drives the show. So that's why there's all kinds of stages and phases of this creative process. Because, if it would be up to spirit, the body would just quit eating and sleeping and doing everything else, just, do something and disregard the limitations of the three-dimensional abilities, right? So we have to also go from what the actual physiology requires. So my way of overcoming those roadblocks is, first of all, making sure that I take time for myself, that it's really not just to stop working, but actually disconnect internet, telephone, television, and check in where I am, what I feel in the moment, what I need, what needs to be expressed, like really honoring and respecting my body, my earthly home. And then when I check in, I go dancing. Dancing is my medicine. For somebody, it's running or swimming or yoga or making love or, painting, meditating, whatever it is. For me, it's dancing. That's what sustains me. Any kind of dancing, I do them all. So it's when you start moving the energy in the physical body, actually physically moving the energy, all the emotional energy is more pliable. It becomes more lucid. It's much easier to move it from your subconscious into your consciousness and kind of, operate with it. Then when you get your cortex involved in that process, then you can start sorting things out and seek for help and kind of, get your way out. But first, you really need to get that energy moving in the body. If you're sitting and sulking, if you're paralyzed, it's going to take a lifetime. So movement is the key. And if you can move, to music, for me, it goes much faster. And then another thing that blocks creativity is, for example, is it going to be good enough? Is it going to be just make myself raw and open and vulnerable and exposed? And what am I exposing really? So in that place, there is something to look into. Where is that creativity really coming from? Is it coming from that ocean of sadness and pain and the tragedy that unfolded, say, in our family or in our own life? And if we were abused, if we were suffocating in life, the creativity flows from that place, and it's actually very healing and very other people can easily resonate with that because it's the history of most everybody on this planet. Look at Picasso, for example. He has a really difficult story that his distorted vision, perception of the world and of people is coming from. And he is one of the most sellable artists in the world because so many people can resonate to that distorted perception, right? And thank goodness he channeled his pain into his painting. But For example, Hitler had that exact story of childhood abuse and neglect to the point that his perception of the world got distorted, but he became Hitler. And so the story gives us the lenses. What we do with those lenses is up to us, really, how we're going to channel the past. But there is also another way of channeling the creative flow. Instead of it being kind of pushed by the past and wanting to be expressed, we can do something. I can talk about it later, what it is, to kind of reverse the charge and instead allow our beautiful future to pull us forward towards itself. And then we can drive that creative flow from that place of connection with the source and speak the truth that is also our truth. But it speaks of love and connection and hope and joy and allows us to open to the possibilities if we're not identifying with the story. Mm-hmm. You see, what happened to us is not who we are. It is, it can be, but the truth about us is that we're so much bigger than anything that ever happened to us. So we can either drive that creativity from what we have experienced, or we can kind of find the switch in our nervous system and flip it on and allow the much bigger truth come through.
And can you speak to that piece that you're saying about how you help people do this, how you make that shift?
I dedicated my adult life 35 years to finding, the answer to that exact question. And at different times, the answers were different. At this point, I have created this Birth into Being method that consists of 40 very different processes and exercises that allow a person to kind of, in a very short time, but in a very supportive, nurturing environment, kind of shed everything that doesn't belong there anymore. And those processes are very different. They're done either in small groups, in larger groups, as a whole group, or one-on-one with the facilitator, or just as a guided meditation. But all of them are done in a slightly altered space. Mm-hmm. That kind of you do a specific form of breathing and movement, and then another kind of specific breathing and movement, and then another kind. And between all of those little steps, you kind of go into this state of you slip beyond your story from which you can operate now. Because if you're stuck in the story, not much can happen. If you're stuck in the story, then your identity is driven by that story, and basically it's a false identity, because you think you are what happened to you, and you are the sum total of those experiences, which can be true, but also can not be true. Because, as I said, we have the remote control to switch the channels, but whether we remember that we have the remote control or not, it depends on the story we're running in our heads. Mm-hmm. And if you are inside the story, you think that it's all there is. But in order for you to see that that there are choices, you have to kind of step outside of your story, in that space in between the stories. And from that place, you can actually start seeing the bigger picture. So stories is probably the main unifying factor that holds all the processes exercising in my birth into being method as a glue that holds them together. But also, regardless, birth into being method, with a vast diversity of healing modalities that are now available everywhere, you know, anything that you can reach for would be helpful. If it's even chiropractor or massage or yoga or dancing or hypnobirthing or creative workshops or rebirthing, whatever there is. I just don't remember what else is there, but I know that every location, especially in California, you open the local directory and there are hundreds and hundreds of versions. But also, you don't have to go somewhere and pay for it. You can just take a bath. You can meditate as you walk through the hills or on the shore of the ocean. You can really just do a lot of homework just by yourself with that clarity of your intention to open to life, to explore the possibilities that your spirit was driven with into this body. You know, with everything we know about getting a body, there shouldn't be any bodies here, because the creation of the body statistically is one of the most unlikely events under the sun. It's really so complex, and there are so many circumstances in our conception that could be interrupted at any given point. Because starting with a sperm getting into the womb, getting into the meeting place where they meet the egg, you know, the egg is there only 2 days out of the month, right? And in order and to even get to that place, the sperm needs to follow through this Grand Canyon in total darkness without any GPS, and find that tiny opening at the end of the vagina, which is the size of 2 sperm heads. You know, what are the chances? How many of them are going to find that opening, right? And then the vaginal mucus is actually toxic for the sperm. It's nature's mechanism of preventing anything that doesn't have to go inside from not going inside. It's kind of our immune system response that fights the sperm. So you would have to run through an army of ninjas, you know, to find the tiny gap and slip through it. And then there is another Grand Canyon, because the egg is not even there. And to find that egg, a sperm has to create this epic journey. The Odyssey is the, you know, human desire to reflect the journey of a male to find his beloved. You know, basically all the fairy tales, the Sleeping Beauty, that's the fairy tale of our conception. You know, here she is dormant for aeons. She was there since this woman was a fetus, kind of a field of pure potentiality, completely dormant, but available to be activated by the kiss, right? And he is this knight in shiny armor. He's just charging towards her, and what if he doesn't find her, which most of them don't. So, but then, even if he found her and he kissed her and he activated her, then she has to have a journey of her own, when she has to find the uterus and attach herself in a very clever, secure way, and then start dividing and form the baby's body, which is also highly unlikely. Most pregnancies women don't even know of, because they kind of discard before there's any signs of it. So given the complexity and improbability of conception, we have to really give ourselves some kudos for sitting here talking and listening, because each one of us is a great success story. From that perspective, just the fact that we're born and still alive speaks volumes. It means that our spirit really had something in mind. Something that it needed the body for. So when you connect with that intention of the spirit to form this beautiful body to kind of nest comfortably into, then all of a sudden you have what you want to say, and then you are unstoppable. And when this alignment happens, when the body is aligned with the soul and they both aligned with the spirit, then you have no need to find excuses for not doing something you want to do. It's only when they're not aligned, then anything is an obstacle. Basically, just the walls in my office are not the right color, and I don't have the right software, and I don't have the right babysitter, and I don't have the right ink in the printer. It's like everything becomes difficult if we're out of phase. Mm-hmm. Now, the most important piece is when the soul is our feminine principle. That's our emotions, our heart, and it needs to be exactly aligned with our body, with the physiology. Like those Russian matryoshka dolls, mm-hmm. nesting dolls. Yes. So it's one inside of the other. And it's as above, so below. As the egg is inside the girl, who is inside her mother, who is inside her grandmother, who is inside the whole family lineage in the timeline. The same way on a different dimension, we have the body, the soul, the spirit, and then all the other dimensions that of our beingness that kind of build, but they have to have a center, and they have to have the same center. And from that place of alignment, it's very easy to discern what is the truth, and what is our pain speaking, and what is our addiction speaking, and what is our feeling lonely speaking, which all of them are true. And they all have the right to have a voice. But we can discern how to sound and which sounds to make public. And there is a lot of creativity that needs to happen first before we're free from that fear of failure, because when you're speaking the truth, you can't fail. The truth, you know.
So the downloads here pretty epic here. This is all day long, and I know that well. So this has been an honor. And before we go here today, is there anything else that you would like to add or share with the audience?
How much time do we have? If not interrupted, I need about 4 hours to outline the basic concept of you know, how this universe operates. But other than that, you know, what can I say? I just really wish that we, the women, can support each other and recognize each other's strengths and beauty and support each other in that, in our desire to be creative, to learn to love. We all have a long way to go in learning to love, because love is probably the most desired experience on this planet, and it's the most distorted and most mysterious, while the most natural and innate state of being. We're just strayed so far away from it due to millennia of living in stress and constant wars and famine and watching our children die, and you know, it's like we have a big project in our hands, and we need every one of us to do their part, to stand up tall and strong and hold our hand, and so we can really connect and reach out and recognize each other's journey and honor and respect wherever we are at the moment. Because everything that is happening right now out there is the mother's unavailability to show up for her child. It's all those children who were neglected and abandoned and not respected that are shooting right now, who are raping right now, who are plotting all unspeakable crimes. They're the children of the women who did not have anybody who gave them a kind advice or offered them a kind meal, you know. So what I see happening is that women are dropping that harem mentality of competition and envy and mutual diminishing each other. We have a very established pattern of behaviors among women that is not worth bringing into our beautiful future. So that is the main thing I wanted to convey, that I can see us all working together.
Thank you so much for all of your wisdom.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Thank you for doing what you're doing and bringing together this set of interviews. It's an honor.
Thank you so much. And thank you, audience, so much for being here. Please check out the rest of the series. We've got some great guests, and have a lovely day. Bye.
Bye-bye.